So here's something I think about more than is probably healthy. The instructions we were all given for how life's supposed to work, get a good education, find a stable job, save some money, trust the institutions, and everything was going to work out. Those instructions were written for a specific economy in a specific era under a specific set of conditions. And that economy and that era and that set of conditions all changed. And the instructions didn't get an update. Nobody sent a memo. Nobody called a meeting. The rules of the game shifted over the course of a few decades, gradually enough that you could miss it if you were busy living your life, which most of us were. And suddenly, the advice that worked reasonably well for your parents or grandparents is just not producing the results for you. And the conventional wisdom's response to that is to tell you to try harder, which is, and I want to be precise here, not the problem, boomer. Let me walk you through what actually changed, because I think it's worth spending real time on before we get into what to do about it. The first and the most fundamental shift was in the labor market, because after World War II, there was an implicit deal between the employers and the employees. You give them your loyalty, your best years, you stay, you contribute, you don't go looking for something better every 2 years, and the company's going to give you stability, predictable advancement, health care, a pension, all of that stuff. They were going to take care of you. You didn't need to go and find other options. That was the deal. Work for us, we take care of you. But that deal was never universal for everyone. It worked best for a specific demographic in a specific kind of organization in a specific industry. But we pretended for long enough that it became like a template. It was the thing that everybody was measuring their own situation against. That's where keeping up with the Joneses came from. The deal that had quietly been dissolving for decades, no one knew. It accelerated in the 1980s when shareholder primacy became the dominant organizing principle of corporate America. What that means is the company's obligation to the shareholder became first instead of the employees. It accelerated again in the 1990s with globalization, which meant work could go wherever it was cheapest. And then it did it again in the 2000s with the financial crisis and the rise of gig work. And it's accelerating again right now with AI doing things that used to require a full-time salaried person to do them. So if you feel like you haven't been keeping up, you haven't. The result is a labor market where loyalty in the old sense is a liability. You are supposed to keep your options open, keep your skills current, keep your market value visible, because the company is definitely not going to do it for you. Where skills that are most valued right now can be commoditized within a decade. Where you're expected to absorb the uncertainty and all of the old deal used to absorb all that for you. And most people are still operating as if the old deal is in effect because nobody officially canceled it. It just stopped applying. So the second shift is in the financial system. Inflation has eroded purchasing power in ways that are invisible until suddenly they're not. Like housing, healthcare, education, the three things most critical to a stable middle-class life and what actually requires has outpaced wage growth for decades, and not even slightly. It's been a significant outpacing. The people who owned assets going into the last several decades of asset price appreciation, they did really well. And if you already had a house in 2010, you probably feel pretty good about that decision right now. But if you were trying to buy your first house right now, recently, you're doing it with math that your parents never had to do at this stage of their lives. And this is not a personal failure, it's just math. The ratio changed. The same financial moves that your parents made at your age, putting 20% down on a house in a neighborhood they wanted to live in, putting money away at rates that beat inflation, paying for college without taking on debt that takes a decade to pay off. These moves are genuinely harder now. It's not because you're doing worse than your parents. It's because the conditions changed. The third shift is geopolitical. The international order that produced cheap goods and stable supply chains and predictable trade relationships for the last few decades is all being renegotiated. It's not collapse, so don't listen to the doomtards. It's not collapsing. It's just changing because it's being renegotiated. Trade relationships that seemed permanent are being reconsidered. The dollar's position in the global financial system faces challenges that it's never faced before. The institutions that organized international cooperation for 80 years are now under strain. So what that means is that at the household level, that the cheap goods that anchored household budgets for a generation are not going to stay cheap. Probably not even be affordable, whether you need them or not. Let me know when we have to bring back wiping on pine cones. Just, that's all I ask. I draw the line. I'm not wiping on a pine cone. I've got to prepare to make sure I've got plenty of toilet paper. Call me a prepper. I don't care. I need toilet paper. The economic stability that came from the United States being the organizing force of global commerce is no longer guaranteed. None of these three things is a catastrophe alone. I'm not being doomy, but they are structural shifts. And the appropriate response to structural shifts isn't panic, it's adaptation. You identify what changed, you figure out what it means for your situation, and you adjust your strategy accordingly. Most families, most households don't have a strategy. That's the problem. Your strategy, if you even have one, it hasn't adjusted. The career advice is still optimized for the old deal. The financial advice is still mostly designed for conditions that existed in a different era. And the assumptions that most people are operating on were formed in a world that has genuinely changed. So this is all about that adjustment. We've got to get you calibrated to the new map. I want to tell you when this actually landed for me, because I absorbed this information gradually over years and understood it intellectually before I understood it in a way that would change anything. Because you can know something but not apply it. The moment that changed things was practical and really just unglamorous. I was looking at a set of financial decisions, not mine, it was somebody else's. And I realized, I'm like, wait, I've been optimizing for a version of this economy that's not right. It's shifted. And that meant that no matter what I was doing, I was automatically wrong. And that hurt my feelings. I didn't want to be automatically wrong. And the uncomfortable thing wasn't even that realization. The uncomfortable thing was me realizing how long I had access to the information that would have changed a whole lot of big decisions for me. And I just didn't even let it land. I ignored it. I wasted so much time being unprepared and thinking how different things would be in the future, but I didn't realize the future was here, that every moment is the future. Your one thing this week is this. Write down the one assumption that you're currently operating on about your career or your finances or your financial future that you have inherited rather than chose. What is one thing that you're doing or expecting because that's what you were told to do and that you've not re-examined in light of the actual current conditions? What are you doing because so-and-so told you that that was just the way it is? Not to beat yourself up about it, just identify it. An unexamined assumption is called a blind spot. A named assumption is something that you can decide about consciously and change. One assumption, just go write it down. My free book is at andrea-oliver.com/no one's coming. It's linked in the show notes. If you have any feedback, questions, you want to tell me I got something wrong, you want to call me a liar, I don't know. I want to hear it all. The show notes have my contact information. Like, share this out. Feedback. I'll see you next time.